And she says, do you believe this is of the Lord? Do you believe this is what he is calling you to do? I said, absolutely. I said, I'm following his leading. And so she said, then why are you still asking this question? She said, for you to not do it is disobedience. And so the question is, are you going to do Anvil or not? It's, are you going to be obedient or not? And to have a wife that would kind of call you to account and challenge you to be the man of the family and to be the leader of the school and to walk in faith when the numbers didn't make sense. I mean, I look back at that, and that was the thing that in me, man, I jumped across the line at that point. There was kind of this line in the sand, and I said, with her as the cheerleader, with her walking alongside, kind of arm in arm in this, we're absolutely going for it. And it was that night we said, all right, I have to write my letter of resignation. We need to jump full-time into this. And that was really the beginning of when Anvil became our full-time passion and ministry and calling. And so well, my name is Andrew Culp, and we get to film here on the property that we live. We're here at the Anvil Academy, and there's a lot that goes into the Anvil story, but there's a lot that goes into the Andrew story, and I guess we can start there. You know, we're transplants to the Southeast. We originally are from northern New Jersey, metro New York area, and I grew up in a fantastic family. I mean, a dad who was and continues to be a hero to me. One who I've kind of been chasing after for my whole life, and trying to kind of grow into the man that he is and kind of be trained and discipled and led by who he is. But you know, from the beginning, our family was a family of educators. And I grew up in a family of educators. My parents both were teachers. My dad was a science teacher. My mom was a home ec teacher, until that no longer paid the bills. And so we had, you know, family of 4 kids. So there were 6 of us. They're kind of grinding in the teaching profession, and it's something that they love. But at some point, the numbers stopped working for my dad, and he had to move out of education into kind of the corporate America world. Wanted to stay in this realm of education. It's what he knew, but went into educational publishing, and so started kind of on the lowest rung of an educational publisher, textbook company, and slowly over the years, and this is what I remember. I don't remember him as a teacher. I remember him working for a company called Prentice Hall, which then became Pearson Education, but saw him kind of climb the corporate ladder, you know, and went from kind of sales to management up into, you know, organizational leadership. And so from a boy's perspective, you just see your dad kind of climbing the ladder, getting the promotion, but at home he was dad, and was engaged, was part of our family, came to, you know, all of our games, and you know, led us into a church community, and was just the man that one day, you know, you would hope to become. But I remember talking with him, and so when we were thinking about college, and he was trying to guide me into, you know, what are you going to study? What are you going to do? I always loved working with younger kids. I loved being in community and relationship, but I was thinking, do I follow my dad's footsteps? Do I go into business, do the corporate piece? Do I go into education, counseling? And you know, I wouldn't say he didn't grieve the fact that he has left education, but he said, be a teacher. He said, do something important, do something that's going to make a difference. And not that his work wasn't. He was providing for our family. He was leading an organization, but I think he recognized the power of teachers and educators and mentors and coaches in the lives of individuals, but also in the trajectory of our culture, of our country, and within the church. And so I just remember him, you know, pointing me in that direction and said, do something with your life worthwhile. Do something that you're going to be proud of. And that's really what drove me into education. And so when I went to college, went to a small little school in Pennsylvania called Messiah College. It had an excellent elementary education program, and kind of poured myself into being a teacher of kind of upper elementary students. And And at the same time, I'm playing sports, I'm in a band, you're doing all of the young man stuff. But ultimately it was teaching that grabbed my heart and kind of just grew my passion for what do I want to do with my life. And so it was be a teacher. And so I was a teacher in elementary environments for a number of years, was kind of second, third, fourth grade teacher. And then I ran into the exact same thing my dad ran into. We had 4 kids. I'm teaching up in Metro New York, trying to make ends meet, and the numbers didn't work. We had to figure out what are we going to do? Am I going to leave the education profession and go into kind of the finance, corporate, Manhattan commuter lifestyle and stay there in Jersey, or was there something else that allowed me to stay in this place of passion, but also be in the place of provider for my family? And it's that, along with kind of a calling into leadership, that I moved into the educational leadership side, went back to school, got master's in principalship and educational leadership, and became a principal of a middle school. And loved it, loved leading and being part of a learning community, loved the messiness of middle school. But it was really in that season that I think the core passion of what would become Anvil began to emerge, because I was in a fantastic school with a fantastic group of teachers, but so much of my day was spent doing discipline in the principal's office. The kids who made it through detention and the dean of students and ended up in my office. And I was doing discipline and kind of behavior control or management for them. But what I saw, it was this pattern. It was this group of boys who were trying to be young men. But we had created a great learning environment from test scores, but the space they were in at school wasn't challenging kind of the core of who they knew themselves to be. And so these boys, and they weren't hard-hearted, they weren't malicious, they weren't bad kids, but what they were doing was trying to act out in the classroom these emerging manhood muscles, of adventure and courage and leadership and resilience. But they're doing it in unrefined ways, right? They're talking back, they're talking, with one another. They're not sitting still. They're kind of out of control in the classroom. But all these impulses that I began to realize, these are going to serve them as men. These are going to be the things that actually help them lead families and lead businesses and lead their churches. All of these early manhood impulses, rather than give them a conduit to mature and refine them for the sake of classroom management, we were trying to just control and suppress them. And I find myself being more and more kind of at war with the job I had to do with kind of maintaining a code of ethics versus what I knew these boys needed. And essentially, we weren't providing an environment that was developmentally kind of responsible for who they were becoming as men. And so that was the first question. I remember talking out on playground duty with this other teacher, Ben. And he was the first teacher I hired there at the school. And he and I would talk as we supervised kids at recess and just began to think, like, what if we could create a place that was geared for the middle school boy who yearned to become a young man, but didn't necessarily have a pathway or have a mentor or have a coach to get there? And what if that could be school? What if that wasn't, some sort of parachurch organization? What if it wasn't some sort of Boy Scout or athletic piece? What if it was the core of their educational experiences, that they would be guided and mentored and coached into becoming young men, and there'd be an environment that actually supported it? A place where they could be active, that every day that they would be forced to get sweaty and get their hands dirty. They'd be challenged to do hard things. They'd be given space to fail at something and then figure out, what do I have to do to fix this and get through the finish line? All these things that look like failure in a traditional school environment, that no, these would be the conduit for refining those manhood attributes. And so that was kind of the birth of the Anvil dream in some ways. And saying that if we could do this and do it in the way of Jesus, because there's a lot of places that try to do this, right? But if we could do it in the way of Jesus, well then that's the thing that would not just be effective from an education piece, but transformational across generations. right? Because we have a lot of strong men in culture, but do we have strong men who are doing the work of Jesus in the way of Jesus? That's where we said, man, if we could do that, that could shift the trajectory. And so it's what we sought to do. I moved down here. I recognized that in North Jersey at the time, I didn't feel like there was fertile soil for that. The educational system didn't really seem to be open to that type of non-traditional learning environment. There was kind of public school, there was private school, there was homeschool, but there wasn't this melding of those worlds together. And my two sister-in-laws lived down in the metro Atlanta area, and we came down for Thanksgiving, and we were in their homes, we were in their communities, learning about how their kids went to school, and really kind of realized two things that would make this work. One, the economics of metro Atlanta were a lot more suitable than the economics of metro New York in terms of staying in the education profession, was one. So we could actually make the numbers work here. The second piece was that the system that Georgia has set up from education side, there is an openness and there seemed to be a cultural hunger for something other than the traditional school model. And so of course here there's public school, there's private school, but there is this whole growing and emerging and maturing model of hybrid education, something that valued the professional art and science of learning and teaching, but also recognized that the family is the core of the educational experience, and to recognize that moms and dads and families have a core part and the primary part in the educational process. I just saw a cultural difference, a different paradigm here for what school could be. And we said, man, this could be a place where we could provide for our family and we could start something that could be really unique. And so I mentioned this before, but so grateful to Lane and Suzanne Phillips. And so they at the time were leading a school called Legacy Community Academy in Alpharetta. And I forget how they got my contact, but they reached out and they said, hey, we're looking for a school leader. We're looking to hire someone to come into this non-traditional school, to this hybrid school, and to lead from an educational side. And so for the opportunity to come down and to be a part of a fantastic learning community that was just Jesus-centered and family-centered, and everything was kind of focused and infused with just the presence of the Spirit within the school. Man, we jumped at that, and we moved our family down to Atlanta, and for 3.5, 4 years worked in that environment, in the Legacy environment, both in Alpharetta and down in Atlanta, and couldn't be more thankful for that time, for the team we worked with, for the other leaders that were there, for the board. And it was out of that the conviction really became concrete, that one, this type of school, this model of school is possible, right? I can feed my family, I can do this professionally, it can be effective, and we can think outside the box and create something that would fulfill all of those questions that Ben and I talked about on the blacktop in New Jersey. Yes, we could create an environment that was geared for middle school boys. Yes, it could be one where every day that their minds would be engaged because they're so curious. Their bodies would be sweaty and hot and tired and sore because they're working hard. There'd be dirt underneath their fingernails because they're gaining calluses and they're actually doing the work with their hands. And we were able to afford a place that we could say it could happen right here. Right? It didn't have to happen in a business park or in a traditional building. It could happen in a barn in Cumming, Georgia. And this old cattle barn that we could take and we could say this could be a transformational classroom for a group of middle school boys that as they journeyed through the wilderness of middle school, these 3 years, right, which oftentimes people look back on their middle school years and they resent the time or they disdain the time. They think about, it was the worst years of my life. There was this author, James Patterson, wrote this book, Middle School Years, The Worst Years of My Life. The guy makes millions of dollars off of selling this book because there's something in that resonates with all of our experiences, that these years of physical transformation and physical awkwardness and puberty's happening here, but at the same time our brains are beginning to actually think deeply about things and question things, and there's just a readiness to be stretched. And we said we could do it here. We could do it on an acre or on a 5-acre plot of land, and then a 12-acre plot of land where it could be wild, and they could be outdoors, and then a classroom would be the world, it would be nature. It would be a forge, it would be a garage, it would be a fortress in the woods. And these would be learning spaces for the boys. That homeschool model in elementary school seemed to work really, really well. And then in middle school, boys in the homeschool environment started to push back against mom. Is that it seemed like the girls were thriving, and there was something about that environment that still wasn't capturing the heart of the boy. We said, this still needs to happen elsewhere. And so wanted to do it initially within the model, and said, no, we need something outside. We need something specifically geared toward boys, and that's really where Anvil Academy began to flourish, and the idea of what it could become took shape. And this is where, again, I'm so thankful for Legacy, because they allowed me to stay on staff, and I was part-time at Legacy leading the Atlanta campus while we were launching the Anvil Academy. But it was this idea that really was based on, there's nothing new about what we're doing, right? The idea that a 11, 12, 13-year-old boy would be ready for real work, would be ready for something that actually carried a gravity with it. I mean, this is the age that for thousands of years, boys would leave the home and they'd start to go into the workshops. They'd start to go into the marketplace, or they go into the fields and work with a father, or work with an elder, work with a grandfather. And so what we've tried to do is just recapture that model of mentoring and education, right? That when the boys are ready, when they've learned kind of this basic literacy and numeracy, and in this season of formation, that they would come and that they would actually do the work of the fields and the work of the marketplace and the work of the shop. They would learn the trades, they would learn the skills from a group of mature men, and a group of men who have walked in that path and have something worth sharing, both in terms of a skill set, but more in terms of a way of being. What does it look like to do real work in the work of Jesus and the way of Jesus? And we keep coming back to that. But we renovated a barn. We had the conviction that this was necessary, and I knew, you know, as my two sons were approaching, I mean, I have 4 kids, but my 2 older sons were approaching middle school age. I knew that I wanted this for them, but really it came to the Lord, is this something of you? And not that we set a fleece out before the Lord, but essentially said, we'll do the work of building this barn, and you need to bring your people. We'll share the story. And if it lands and people come, we'll know it's of you. And so we held a prayer night. We held our first Forge night. We invited people to come and hear the vision and say, does this resonate with you, or does this resonate with someone that you know? Would you share the story? And you know, thanks be to God, the first year we had 12 boys. And that was the thing. We said, if we could get to 12, that would be a critical mass to launch this thing. And I'm thinking, who's going to send, you know, their boy to some guy's, you know, property in the middle of Cumming, Georgia, and this group of pioneers kind of shouted a resounding yes. This needs to be here, not just for my son, but for the future of this community. But I'm willing to walk my son into this. And so, and those first 12 boys became our inaugural class.
What year was that?
So that was 2017. So 2016, we file our papers and we incorporate, we go through the nonprofit process. But 2017 is our first group of 12 boys. And there was a guy, Doug Eskew, who volunteered his time that first year to kind of be the second. We needed to, certainly for insurance and just for safety, you know, 2 of us. And so Doug came along. He had been a retired teacher, and so he brought experience and he brought wisdom, both as a teacher but also as a dad. You know, I had 4 kids at the time, but my oldest was, I think, 4th grade at the time, and he comes as one who had kids go all the way through, and he just kind of brought a sage wisdom to this work of walking boys through this wilderness, growing into manhood. And he was great in that first year. It was a provision of the Lord. And so after the first year, we recognized that, okay, there was something here worth pursuing. And so I was back and forth though with my wife Katie, and Legacy had taken care of us well from a compensation side. I was still working there part-time that first year, and I wasn't able to take any sort of salary. Actually, we were losing money on Anvil, and we're going back and forth. This needs to be full-time. This needs to be our focus. But man, how are we going to make this work financially? And I remember I would just kind of ruminate on this, and was back and forth and back and forth. And it was one night we were sitting in our kitchen. We have this little galley kitchen, but I'm sitting up on the countertop. And once again, I'm kind of like trying to run the numbers in my head, and I'm talking with Katie about it. And she turns around, and I think partially prophetically and partially out of exasperation, she was kind of like, she's like, you need to stop. She's like, look me in the eye. And she says, do you believe this is of the Lord? Do you believe this is what he is calling you to do? I said, absolutely. I said, I'm following his leading. And so she said, then why are you still asking this question? She said, for you to not do it is disobedience. And so the question is, are you going to do Anvil or not? It's, are you going to be obedient or not? And to have a wife that would kind of call you to account and challenge you to be the man of the family and to be the leader of the school and to walk in faith when the numbers didn't make sense. I mean, I look back at that, and that was the thing that in me, man, I jumped across the line at that point. There was kind of this line in the sand, and I said, with her as the cheerleader, with her walking alongside, kind of arm in arm in this, we're absolutely going for it. And it was that night we said, all right, I have to write my letter of resignation. We need to jump full-time into this. And that was really the beginning of when Anvil became our full-time passion and ministry and calling. And so from that, 12 students grew to 24, and then to 48, and then 96. And we grew to the point where we said, we're at capacity here on campus, and that's 104 students. So we're here in Cumming, Georgia, on this campus with 104 students, seeking to forge men from boys coming in into the middle school years and launch them into high school as strong young men.